other times. And it's not a point that I think is really that well known by everybody. We'll see what happens. So, somehow or other, I get the impression that he was not being so successful, or not as successful as the other devotees. In some way, he was discouraged by the results he was getting. And he was actually becoming depressed. So then Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter the results you're getting. And he said, actually, all these projects are just created for us to be engaged in doing something. Because as you know, if you're not engaged, what do? Twiddle your thumbs? Stare at your thumbs and twiddle them all day? If, for example, we could be engaged in hearing and chanting 24 hours a day, then, yeah, it's working. If we could be engaged in hearing and chanting 24 hours a day, perhaps Prabhupada would engage us that way. But obviously, we need to be active, very active. So, in this letter, Prabhupada is saying, don't worry so much about the result of your service. The service is just there to purify you. So now if you're becoming discouraged because you're not getting results, then the service is becoming counterproductive. Because it's not about the result as much as it is about being engaged. Then, in another conversation or letter, and I don't exactly remember the context. You can come closer, I don't have to yell. The Prabhupada said, I've created all these big projects for all the big men or women to be engaged, to have something to do which is challenging, which is absorbing, which is engaging. So I think that's significant. In light of what we've been discussing last week, where we established the premise that if we find service which is inspiring to us specifically, that helps us so much, and it helps us in our sadhana when we're inspired in our service. And here Prabhupada is saying, it doesn't matter so much the service, what you're doing, but the point of the service is to be engaged. Did you find that on Facebook? You went to my page? No? Have any of you heard this before? These big projects are just to engage the devotees? Because normally, we look at these big projects are to save the fallen souls. Now in this scenario, Prabhupada is saying, it's more for you than them. Or you could say, at least he's balancing the other side, so equally important for us as them. And anyone who's ever done any preaching knows that the preaching is equally important for the preacher, right? As it is for the people you're preaching to. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told that to Prabhupada. It will be good for the people you preach to, it'll be good for you. So you can't separate from one another. It's there. Okay, I'm going to read it. It's better than me telling you about it. My dear Tejas, please accept my blessings. I am in due receipt of your letter dated December 10th, 1972. And I am very much disturbed to hear that you have become disturbed. I thought that was funny. I'm disturbed that you're disturbed. In other words, Prabhupada's saying, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned that you're disturbed. I'm disturbed about your disturbance. I'm very much disturbed to hear that you have become disturbed in mind. Do not be disturbed. There is no cause for anxiety. You are doing your best to serve Krishna. That is very much appreciated. So do not lose enthusiasm out of frustration. That will spoil everything. Frustration means frustration of not achieving what you would like to achieve. We all experience that. Yes? We have goals. We don't reach the goals, we can get very frustrated. We can feel something's wrong with us, or Krishna's cursing us, or stars are cursing us, or somebody down the street is cursing us, or I was just cursed when I was born, or whatever. I must have been very sinful, very bad, whatever, and I can't achieve what I'd like to achieve. There was a song when I was growing up, something like, I forget how they said it, but if I have any luck, it's always bad luck. Something like that. So do not lose enthusiasm out of frustration. That will spoil everything. Krishna consciousness means we should always be satisfied and happy. Not that we must work something impossible, becoming overburdened, and then because we are unhappy by so much trouble, we lose enthusiasm altogether and give up all hope. It sounds like he was really overburdened and overworked. No, if too much endeavor is there, that is to be avoided. By all means, we must preserve our spiritual status. That is the point. Not that we are mad after big buildings, many devotees, life members, this, that. No. So here's the point. These are only ways to engage the devotees so that they may apply the principles of devotional living to some kind of work for practical realization of these principles. It is not the result of the work we want. If only one person daily, if we sincerely preach to just one person in a day, that is sufficient. Never mind big programs. So now, in other words, Prabhupada's focusing on sincerity, not the result, quality, and not that you do so much that you give up your sadhana, you give up your sanity, you become disturbed. Because the whole point of service is to uplift us and engage us, because we have to do something. So if you're engaged in a way that you become frustrated, then it's a paradox. Because the very engagement is meant to help you become blissful, right? And happy. So never mind big programs. My request to you is that you do not be bothered. You do not be bothered by these things. And I have instructed Tamal Krishna and Shyamsundar to send you men so that they will do it. It is rest assured. And he needs more men. Krishna does not like to see his sincere devotees suffer or become frustrated or depressed. He will not stand idly by in such case. So do not fear on that account. Krishna has got some plan for you. Always think in that way. And very soon he will provide everything by your heart's desire. And also, an undercurrent of this is you try sincerely, and then Krishna gives you one person, 1,000,000 people, 1 rupee, 1,000,000 rupees. Little success, a lot of success. That you don't always have control of. I had a friend, not a friend, he became a devotee, and then we became friends, and he was involved in the recording industry before he was a devotee. And he said his observation was the most talented people never become famous. The most talented people, the greatest musicians, are not the ones that become the most famous. Now we have the example of Srila Prabhupada. When he was beginning his mission in India, and if you read Prabhupada's biography, you know that in India it was one struggle after another. And I often think that just imagine if Srila Prabhupada became extremely successful in India. Let's say in the late 50s or early 60s, he was very successful. Like extremely successful. That probably would have postponed his coming to America because he would have to deal with the success in India. It may have put it off for many, many years. Maybe he would wait to bring some people with him. You don't know. But I personally think that Prabhupada's lack of success in India was Krishna's will, because his real success would come in India after he went to America. And I believe Krishna wanted him to fail in India so that he would focus, or he'd have time to focus all his energy on coming to America and preparing for that. Now, Prabhupada never forgot about India. And once he established ISKCON in the West, then he came back to India because he wanted personally to preach in India. And the mission his spiritual master gave him was the rest of the world. His personal mission was India. So sometimes failure could possibly be part of Krishna's desire. Then you might say, well, in my situation, I'm probably not going to save the world, so how would my failure be part of Krishna's desire? Maybe your failure is part of his desire to show you that you're not ready yet to fulfill your goals. You have to become more qualified. And so your failure is just feedback that it needs to be better. You're not doing it well enough. Or it could be other kinds of feedback. You may be doing it well enough, you just have to be detached. Or maybe there's a different way to do it. But again, we go back to this main point. The main point is be engaged. Doing something. So Prabhupada said, I have these big leaders that create these big projects, so these big leaders can be engaged. Because they, especially if you're a leader, you need something big to absorb you. Right? You like to do things. Yes? You don't just like to sit around. I hope you don't just like to sit around. So, I think it's a very important point. This point also relates to what we were saying last week, that in connecting with what would be the best service for me according to my nature and according to my inspiration, I was mentioning that what often gets in the way is, what should I do? And the should is coming from, not from your inspiration, but from a thinking of, well, what's the right thing? Which is not a bad way to think. But that thinking can get very much filled with kind of guilt and shame. And if I don't do this, I must be a bad person. If I'm thinking this, then I'm not going to do this, and I feel like I should do this, and I'm not sincere if I don't do this. A lot of that gets in the way. In some cases, it might be correct, but I think in most cases it's just us with some kind of guilt. Well, I ought to do this, I should do this. And a lot of the I ought to and I should do are not the things that would really inspire us, or things that we really would do well, or things that would give us energy. And so then I mentioned last week, you have a lot, remember I was saying, you have a lot of very surrendered devotees who leave ISKCON, which is of course a paradox. But surrendered devotee wouldn't leave ISKCON. But they're so surrendered, they surrendered beyond their capability to surrender, rather than engaging their natural propensities, inclinations, or desires. They said, well, I'll do anything, I'll surrender to it, whatever you want, and I'll kind of suppress who I am and what I would like to do, because I don't think that's surrender. And then they surrender so much that one day they're so discouraged, so depressed, so frustrated, so unhappy, you don't see them anymore. Yes, you've seen, and we've all seen that. Right? Anybody not seen that? Okay, it's a common phenomenon. He was so surrendered, he blew it. You could write a book about that. So, of course, we discussed, as a brahmachari or brahmacharini, you're living in the temple, so your training is to do the needful. So that's like the student. As a student, that's their training. But you have your life vocation. That will come later. And so, in cases of a person surrendering themselves right out of the movement, it is possible in some cases that it's mixed with this feeling of, this is what I should do, and I would feel guilty doing this, because I'd like to do this inspires me, and therefore I feel bad doing it. Which is not, I think, healthy. You understand? At least my experience in trying to help people get more in touch with what Krishna created them to do, this guilt has to be cleared out. Sometimes it's, for some people, it's very strong. For others, it doesn't exist. Maybe it exists a little for all of us. We're kind of philosophically adjusting to understand that you do have a nature, and to engage that nature is what varnashram is. And that our social values in Western society have created this guilt that I should be good at this and I'm not. And that's what sometimes makes it difficult for us to connect with our nature, because we think we're supposed to be something we're not, and we don't discover what we are because we're focused on doing what we think we're supposed to do, because that seems to be what everybody's doing, or it seems to be the standard of success. Kind of like the scenario of a student who doesn't do well in science or math. Say, what's wrong with you? Why are you so stupid? They may be a genius in art and not good in science. So there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that's a talent they don't have. But in modern education, they may make students feel like these are certain talents that you need to have, and because you don't have them, you feel bad, and then the worst thing is you may not discover your real talent, because your real talent may not be something that the educational system values. Right? And we had talked about that, how in India there's so many technological schools. How many Indians do you know who majored in English literature? You know any? It's very uncommon. Even to major in art, history, sociology, photography, the humanities, liberal arts, it's very rare. So as far as the guilt, that's something for you to consider, if that's an obstacle for you to personally discover what will inspire you. An example, your spiritual master is very much into festivals. Your spiritual master may be very much into varnashram. Your spiritual master may be very much into book distribution. Your spiritual master may be very much into academics or education of devotees or devotee care. Because we're all individuals, naturally, different spiritual masters are also focused in particular ways according to their nature, right? You see that, it's very clear, right? One spiritual master is developing a community, one's developing many temples, one's developing education, one's developing festivals. What else? Farms, self-sufficiency. So it's possible that if your spiritual master is developing a specific area, and somehow or by your nature, you're more inclined to another area, you may feel guilty. Well, he's my spiritual master, I should help him, but I'm not necessarily inclined or inspired entirely by that, I'm inspired by something else. That could easily happen, right? And then you start thinking, well, I must be a bad disciple because he's into this, but I'm into that. Okay? But that's not necessarily true. It's just that you have your nature, and he has his nature, he has his focus, he has his priority, which may or may not exactly align with you. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you as an individual have your individual nature. Now, of course, naturally, you want to support the work of your spiritual master. So then you might see how within the realm of what he's doing, I can fit in according to my nature. Right? So he does festivals, I'm an artist, I do the posters. I'm a hermit, I don't like to go on stage, so I just do the posters, and I hide in the back. Right? Something like that. Does that make sense? I wanted to read a few things. Also, that would be relevant. I was reading, I was taking notes on some of the experts who have studied successful people. And what they found out is that, and you may not be aware of this, it's a very important point. But if you find very, very successful people, they're only good at a few things. And they focused on developing the skills which they were good at. And you might think that a successful person is good at everything. But it's not true. And the other thing I read, and this has helped me a lot, this is very important. When you discover your talents, where it really takes shape and starts to become valuable for you and other people is when you focus on those. To become more and more expert, rather than thinking I have to do a million things, you realize this is what I'm really good at, this is what I really like, and to become more and more expert at that through focusing on that. And one of the things I've noticed for myself, and I think many of us have this problem because I've heard other teachers talk about it, is you're trying to do too many things rather than focus on one or two things you're really good at. So I see it like a circle. So as opposed to getting from here to here, you're in a circle and you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you kind of go around and you never really make progress because you're doing too many different things. As opposed to focus would be like taking one thing in the circle and then following it, and you're right out of the circle and you keep going. Does that make sense? So I actually at one point in my life felt that way. I was working very, very hard for many, many years. Many, many hours a day. I can work very hard and very focused. But the problem was I was focused on many things, not one thing. So after like 3 years, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere. Because I get a phone call, Prabhu, we're doing this play, can you be in it? Well, we're doing this, we need somebody to edit this, you're a good editor. We're doing this, we're going to put together a bhajan band, we need you. And then, it was like because I wasn't focused, I would say, okay, that sounds like fun, that sounds inspiring. So I'd do it, and that was the circle. It was all these different activities. But they weren't progressively taking me anywhere. And I intuitively started to understand that, and simultaneously, I had read many success gurus say the same thing. That focus, focus, focus on what you're good at, and then focus all your activities on that. So instead of going to the play, practice, and then the bhajan, and the this, and the that, and that, you're working on your project. Not that you can't do these other things, but primarily you're working on that which is really what you want to do, what you want to contribute, what inspires you, what you discover is who you are. And that's your main focus. And then you'll see from doing that, you start to make progress because you're not splayed out anymore. The second thing I learned from our good friend Akrura, who many of you may know Akrura. Akrura does coaching. And so I think one of the most valuable things that Akrura told me is that whatever you're doing, try to be expert at it. And There's this quote here. I don't know if I can find it, but it's about being expert, which is quite interesting. Well, basically, it's about becoming expert and offering what you do, which is a service. And then by being expert, people, because you're expert, people will always need you. You'll always have that service to do because you're good at it. So I really like that advice. Don't just do it, but try to do it really well. When you focus on this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this for Krishna. Now let me do it really well for Krishna. And then as you do it, as you focus, as you become more expert, then many opportunities open, and then obviously your service becomes more effective, and you become more satisfied. Don't become neurotic and thinking, in 3 days I have to be the best in the world. That will get you in trouble. But if it's something you're cultivating over time and focusing on, you will get expert naturally. But that effort to become more expert, I think, is very important. And that's one of the qualities of devotee, that it's expert. And so, when people appreciate expertise. Now, another problem that we run into quite often is that when we realize what we'd like to do and we start focusing on it, then we need to have some intention or some vision of where we're going, what we want to achieve, some idea. Right? The clearer the idea, the better. This is what I like to do. I'd like to start this project or be part of this project, the existing project, or develop a new department within an existing project, or I'd like to write a book, or whatever it is you'd like to do. Start an orphanage, make a movie, travel the world and teach a particular thing. So then, one of the obstacles you can run into at that point is just self-confidence. Can I actually do this? Which then could completely ruin everything. Once you've connected, and now you've focused, now you're inspired, you've got over the guilt, everything's good, and then this thing comes up. But I'm not good. I may not be good at this, or I may fail. So, then we have to go back to that original point that Prabhupada was making. And I think this is very important as a means of being dedicated and inspired, is that it's not what you do, but it's the attitude that's most important. Now in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada wrote in a purport about the mood of writing, because Krishnadas Kaviraj was expressing his mood in writing Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so Prabhupada said, the mood is not to be published, the mood is to be purified. You remember, any of you remember reading that purport? It's not to be published, of course. In other words, he meant it's not to become famous, but it's to be purified. So then we go back to that original point, that we do service for our purification. And we do service with sincerity and honesty. And then we remember that story that Prabhupada often told of the brahmachari who would sell one magazine. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would praise him, done very well. Even if it sold one magazine for 50 paisa. So that idea is there also. So if you're not as successful because as you'd like to be, or you feel you lack the confidence to be successful, then the meditation has to be the effort. The effort is what is important, the endeavor and the mood. And then, if Krishna wants to make you successful, he can do that. And sometimes I feel that Krishna may think, if I make this devotee too successful too soon, it won't be good for the devotee. The devotee may not be able to handle it. Maybe the devotee will become proud. Maybe the devotee will think, I can slacken in my sadhana because I'm so successful. So sometimes Krishna will make us successful in his own time, according to his own desire. Or maybe he won't. But that's a fundamental teaching of the Gita. Right? It's like I have a package. I have 3 packages and I say, can you carry this? Maybe I give you one and see how you'll do. Then I'll give you the next one. So is that too heavy? Can you manage that? You might say, oh yeah, that's enough. So then I'll hold on to the third. So sometimes Krishna's like that. Okay, here's a little. Let's see, can you carry it? So that's also possible. So the purity of our desire and our ability to handle success may be part of what Krishna is giving us. And Krishna may want us to live a more simple life. So we may never be in the limelight. But to have that desire is perfectly fine. To pray for it is perfectly fine. But the real thing is to be attached to the work and the activity. Now, another thing I think is interesting for us to note, we're aware of many, many famous people in history. Your Einsteins, your Mark Twains, your Longfellow, Newton, who else? Depends what country you're from, I guess. Winston Churchill, Mussolini. You've got someone in your country. We all have these historical personalities. But in some cases, these people were nobody when they died. And they became famous after they died. And people discovered their writings and distributed them. So they may have died feeling that maybe they were a failure or not very successful in what they've done, and later on became hugely successful, extremely well known, extremely well loved, but not in their lifetime. You never know. And Prabhupada used to say, if I can make one person a pure devotee, I will consider my mission a success. So maybe you write an article, write a book, do a service, and that touches the heart of one person. As Prabhupada touched the heart of one Ananta Shanti in Russia, and he touched the heart of many. So sometimes that's all it takes. I have a friend, and he was in Malaysia probably in the 1980s. He was part of a temple in San Diego, and they had a group of men who were selling paintings, and they would travel all around the world to sell these paintings to support the temple. And they ended up in Malaysia, because at that time the economy in Malaysia was very, very good. And so they weren't really there preaching, but Malaysia is full of Hindus, so they had their house and they had their program, and so some people knew that they were devotees or devotees of sorts, so they made friends with a few, just on the side by accident. And this young man was coming, they were preaching to him, nice person like that. And then like 10, 15 years later, they found out that that young man who was just hanging out with them occasionally, he's like in charge of the whole country now. He's like the leader. Isn't that interesting? So you never know the effect of what you do. So, as Prabhupada's saying here, we don't want to be discouraged if we don't see results. We want to be attached to the effort and sincere about doing it. That's very important. And if we lack some degree of self-confidence, the best advice I can give is just do it anyway. Because when you do it, you realize that you have more ability than you thought. And a lot of lack of self-confidence is just lack of doing it. They say sometimes we fear doing the things we've never done. So our fear is not really based on any experience. It's like, you might say, I could never do that. And then I would ask you, have you ever done it before? And then you say, no. And then I would say, well, how do you know you could never do it if you haven't tried? It's kind of a logical way of looking at fear, right? So sometimes that fear can really only be conquered by doing it. And another point, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I like occasionally to read. I have this little thing that's a book summary in it. I think it may have had summaries of the lives of some very successful people. And I find it's kind of interesting to understand their consciousness. You might say, obviously interesting to understand Prabhupada's consciousness, but he's so transcendental that sometimes I find it interesting for people who were kind of down here on the earth to see how they dealt with their emotions and who became very successful. And one of the things that you'll find commonly is that people who did very bold things, people who became very successful, were not the people who didn't have fear. They had as much fear as everyone. Sometimes they may have had more fear. Because I think it's easy to think, well, these people were fearless. It's not always true. Or what the literature on this says, none of them were fearless. That may or may not be true, but at least we can say the majority were not fearless. But what made them different is that even though they had the fear didn't handicap them. So they still acted. So I think that's important. Because I think we would think, no, this person's fearless, that's why they're successful. But rather, it's just the difference is, they had fear, but they acted. And that's one of the ways to overcome fear. And as we're saying, if you're not so worried about the result, then it's easier. Because it doesn't matter. As long as the result of failing is not that you die, or you're not doing something dangerous. Now I want to read you something, if you allow me. I was inspired by this. It's actually from a book called A Course in Miracles. It's not in our line of Shastra. Do you know about it? I had a godbrother who read the book, and he wrote me, he said it's very Krishna conscious. And as far as I understand, it was channeled to one person from Jesus, or apparently from Jesus. Yeah, so this is the channel. It's supposed to be the channeling of Christ. But this is written by a woman. As far as I know, this was either from the Course in Miracles or a paraphrase of it. But I really liked it. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, fabulous? In other words, she's saying, many of us are afraid to be great. Afraid to be great. Should I read it again? Our deepest fear is that we are inadequate. We're not good enough. No. Our deepest fear is not that we are not good enough. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful. We're frightened by our power. So we think, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, beautiful, famous? Who are you not to be this? You are a child of God. This is an English writer, so I guess it's fine. It's fine. You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. In other words, just doing a little bit in a small way doesn't serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about being small so that other people won't feel bad around you. Like, you become so successful that you think, well, I'll make other people feel bad. We are all meant to shine. We were born to manifest the glory of God. It's in all of us. As we let our light shine, we inspire others to shine. As we become free from our fear, then people around us become free from our fear, from their fear. So he's pointing out an interesting point here, that some of us are afraid to be successful. And there may be different reasons why. Some people feel like they would not be able to handle success. Some people feel like it's not their karma to be successful. God doesn't like me enough to be successful. It would be uncomfortable to be successful. I mean, just imagine thousands of people wanted your autograph. How uncomfortable that would be. You walk into a program, you have to shake hands with 1,000 people, and they're all thinking you're special. So I like the statement, you don't serve God by playing small. So there's kind of a balance here, this idea we should serve no matter what the result is. But on the other side of the equation is we should not be afraid of the possibility that the result may be very good. Is that okay? For us, from a Krishna conscious perspective, maybe karmically, I may not be destined to do something wonderful. But I may not, by my karma, be destined to do something wonderful. But maybe Krishna wants to use me for something wonderful. That's possible. So we shouldn't resist that. Do not resist. Maybe I should speak in sign language, and she'll understand them. Yes? Sign language? Resist. One of the things that I teach devotees is that we have to learn sometimes how to receive honor. That's part of what it means to represent the disciplic succession. So that if Krishna wants to put you in a position of honor, that becomes your service to accept it humbly. And I know that's uncomfortable for many devotees. But if you are very connected to your inspiration and very focused on it and dedicated to working in that area, you will be more successful. And there will be people who honor you. And so we have to learn how to accept that honor in a humble way. And not shy away from service because the honor comes. As she's saying, you should never think by doing that, that's service. Okay. I've said enough. Now, two things. You can ask questions, or I can ask you the question that I asked you last Sunday night. You can meditate on your Dharma. What do you think your Dharma is? What do you think your calling is? But I have many exercises we can do to bring this out, which I haven't done yet. And if you like, we can do those tomorrow. But did anybody connect yet? Or get an inkling of what their Dharma is?
I do every day, which is the activities that I actually really like. I can't really happen inside the other ones that I was like, I wonder why I'm actually doing that. It kind of fell into doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found it helpful to realize.
Be conscious.
Yeah.
Be aware, yeah.
Realize really creating and not just doing that.
Yeah. Good. That's a good exercise. It's just she's saying just to be aware of the things that you do every day that you couldn't live without doing. The aspects of just your nature that come out in your daily activities that are you, that are so much you that you just do them, and without doing them, you would go crazy, basically, or be unhappy or unfulfilled. Right? Something like that? I have the same experience also. But my experience was that I changed my environment. And I went into an environment which was totally without any regulation. There was no temple. And I didn't have to do anything at any time of day. So I was just going through certain motions of activities, and nothing was scheduled. It was just like a vacation, you could say. At that point in my life, all my responsibilities were out preaching. So when I wasn't out preaching, I had no other responsibilities. So when I wasn't in the preaching field, it wasn't like I had a million emails and phone calls to deal with. So I was left alone to just do whatever I wanted. And after a week, there was a pattern, and I just did the same thing every day, and there was no schedule. I made my own schedule naturally by just the rhythms of my body and mind. And I thought it was so interesting to notice that. And that's when I became aware of my nature more clearly. I mean, I kind of understood it, but I became aware of it more clearly. Because I was just left to do nothing. So now you don't have to do anything. What do you do? What would you do? Like I told you last week, if there's a choice of eating or cooking, I would fast. Because I'm just not into cooking. Or maybe I'd make popcorn. And maybe I'd eat popcorn for lunch or something. Or I'd find some old stale bread and cut it up and put peanut butter on it. Okay, that's lunch. Maybe put an apple on it. But that wouldn't take long. But maybe if you were left alone, you had nothing to do, you might spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So I was going through these patterns every day. They were the same patterns. And then I realized, due to my nature,